خير الخلق قدوتنا
تعال وزر وشاركنا وقم بالخير سابقنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. Last halaqah we took an introduction about the book and a brief biography about the author and some issues pertaining to talab al-ilm. And there's plenty of other matters that pertain to talab al-ilm we should go over. Some we mentioned in previous series, but some need to be addressed really in an independent series by itself. Many neglect the spiritual aspect in talab al-ilm. For example, one must ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala consistently to grant him beneficial ilm and sincerity. وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala said Allah didn't order the messenger to make dua for anything specific of the matters of the dunya other than gaining knowledge. The more one learns, the more one should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like when Allah grants you wealth, you thank Allah and He gives you more. The same with knowledge. Some of the old-time imams said we didn't reach the status we reached except by thanking Allah every time we learn something. We thank Allah for knowledge attained, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us more. Knowledge is among the biggest ni'am one must thank Allah for. The person's being honored by being entrusted with the deen of Allah. And when sincere with that, it's a sign that he or she are special. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected them. مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. When Allah wishes good for someone, He will bestow upon them the comprehension of the deen. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, كل من أراد الله به خيرا لابد أن يفقهه في الدين فمن لم يفقهه في الدين لم يرد الله به خيرا. Everyone who Allah wants good in, He will bestow knowledge upon him, and if He doesn't bestow knowledge upon him, then He doesn't wish good for him. And Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala said, knowledge is the leader to the taqwa of Allah. Among the most wise time spent is the time spent in talab al-ilm. Look at those who left behind their hometowns and even their continents. They left their family and their wealth. They left their comfort and luxury to learn a few hadith or sometimes one hadith. And now it's in someone's pocket and he turns away from it. One should be patient in learning and not rush into it or take it to an extreme, especially when starting. The ulama studied for years upon years. Some want to rush and finish a book. We didn't even start this book, and some are already asking how long it'll take to finish the book. And that's because they're eager to tullab al-ilm. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them. The book can be finished in less than a one-day seminar. One full day seminar, the full book can be completed. Al-Usul al-Thalatha that we studied could have been finished in a road trip, and we actually did do it one time in a road trip. But there's a difference between one type of finishing and another. These classes are made to target the physical and virtual followers, yes, but also beyond that, with the foresight of the descendants and generations who may come and read and listen or watch it bi'idhnillahi ta'ala until Yawm al-Din. And that is why I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I ever say a word or a lecture or a talk that is not in complete accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah, ask Allah al-Hayy al-Qayyum to submerge it and never let it emerge. And if it has emerged and spread, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bury it to no return. Some dear brothers were somewhat frustrated at the pace that we had going on Al-Usul al-Thalatha because they were eager and they wanted to move on to more advanced books. You do remember what I said. I said it's better to go in detail and lay down a strong foundation and raise a generation covering this matter thoroughly rather than speed it up and take several books and just say we covered 5 or 6 books. In fact, the concepts and matters that were studied in Usul al-Thalatha was a summary of way more than 5 books. And by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the consequence is that it had raised firm muwahideen and muwahidat who I'm truly proud of. And Allah is my witness, it is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our resources are less than one can imagine. But the pure tawheed intertwined with pure hearts and raised pure muwahideen and muwahidat. And as the young Jahili poet said, سَتُبْدِي لَكَ الْأَيَّامُ مَا كُنْتَ جَاهِلًا وَيَأْتِيكَ بِالْأَخْبَارِ مَنْ لَمْ تُزَوِّدِي. The days will reveal what's hidden and you don't know, and the news will come from ways you didn't perceive it. They say Abdullah ibn Wahb, the Imam, the Muhaddith, he studied with Imam Malik for more than 20 years, never departed his side. That's why you read in history, we were with our Shaykh so-and-so when he gave his clothes to a poor person that asked him. We returned from this place, we attended this place. They were inseparable from the shadow of their ulama for long periods of time. When that doesn't happen, you sadly see those who learn a few matters of fiqh, a few haram and halals, they think they're the Imam Maliks of this era. Or a few ilal of hadith, or the different methodologies of hadith, and they think that they're the Yahya ibn Ma'ins of this era. And no one else knew it before them, and no one knows it like them, and no one will grasp it after them. The demeanor at least depicts that. Or a few aspects on Iman and Kufr, and suddenly they're the Ibn Taymiyyahs and Ibn Hanbals of this time. We gave a little boy recently some toys, and among them was that classical vintage Raka stack toy. It's that famous ring stacking toy that's been made for years and years, and they never stopped making it. The baby became overwhelmed with that specific toy, and he chose it over all the other toys. I told the baby's father, when you were a young boy, we bought you that exact same toy, and by Allah, I had that same toy when I was a child myself, I remember it. From the excitement on the baby's face, if he could speak, he would say, this is mine and only mine. No one had it before me, no one will have it after me. It was made for me and only me. And that's how some act when they grasp on certain aspects of knowledge because of the lack of upbringing. Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala said, لما أدبني الدهر أراني نقص عقلي وكلما ازددت علما زادني علما بجهلي وكلما ازددت علما, the more I gain knowledge, the more it makes me realize how ignorant I am. وكلما ازددت علما زادني علما بجهلي. In a recent private halaqah with some dear beloved brothers, we were going over portions of the works of Imam Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti rahimahullah ta'ala, and we went over the fact that al-Shanqiti, who is a direct teacher, a sheikh of my shuyukh, towards the end of his life, he reclined back and stopped giving fatwas. And when pressured, he would quote ulama rather than give his own fatwa. Usually, as time goes by and one is steady in learning and teaching, they progress and excel in ilm, especially when you're consistent in researching and in teaching as he was. The thing about it though, is when you excel in beneficial ilm, you also excel in the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and humility to Allah. And it reached a point with him where he no longer felt he was at the status of given fatwa, when he in fact was really one of the biggest imams of this century. Being with ulama, especially ulama of haqq, humbles one no matter how much he learns. And you see a difference in the demeanor and knowledge of one who gets his ilm with ulama and ulama of haqq, and one who doesn't. And sometimes, of course, especially nowadays, as deviance is spreading among the ulama, it's very difficult to find alim of haqq to take from. If the ilm you're gaining is not gaining you more fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and humility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then to His creations, then something is seriously wrong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Ibn Mas'ud said knowledge isn't about gaining a lot of ahadith, it's about fearing Allah. And Imam Malik rahimahullah has a very, very similar quote. Imam Ibn Abd al-Barr related that Umar ibn Abdul Rahman said, we learned Imam Malik's Muwatta with him in 40 days. His famous compilation of hadith, we learned it in 40 days. And he said, Imam Malik said when they were done, a book that took me 40 years to write, took you 40 days to learn. And some said it even took him 60 years to compile. He was implying one should go at a slower pace and letting them know the value and amount of ilm they got in that short time. There's much more on talab al-ilm that needs to be addressed in a nice long series, but I wanted to address specifically the issue of the pace, and some are already asking when we'll finish, and I don't think we'll be going slow. It'll depend really on the feedback and level that I see. I like to be comprehensive on any topic we fully go over because our lives are very short and our da'wah is always interrupted. The foundation I like to lay on various sciences we teach is so that طلاب العلم can excel and work on their own after that, if needed. And I said this method can easily be explained in a one-day seminar, but I don't think that's the proper route to go. Now, seeking the aid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's start with the book. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, said, مدار الفقه على عشرة أشياء. Fiqh roams around 10 matters. The realms, the spheres of fiqh are founded on 10 components. Number 1, ibadah, worship. And that's the people's obligation toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salah, zakah, hajj, jihad. What's between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the creation. The second is mu'amalat. Social dealings among people. Like business transactions, buying and selling, matters that pertain to riba. Wajtima'un. Ijtima' literally means getting together, getting something or someone together. What he means by here is getting two people together, getting the spouses together, meaning marriage. Wafiraqun literally means separated, which is the opposite of marriage, divorce. Matters that pertain to divorce, and like it, khulu' or matters that branch off from that. Wajinayatun, which is injurious crimes, like qisas, the punishment for killing. Wa ma'asi, and ma'asi is sins. What he means here is legal punishments for matters like zina, homosexuality, qadhf, drinking, stealing, apostating. Jinayat wa ma'asi. واستخراج ذلك. So the seventh one is استخراج ذلك. استخراج ذلك literally means taking something out of someone or something. And what he means is matters you go to court for to get your rights out. Matters of witnesses, matters of judgeship. وأكل, which is matters pertaining to eating. وشرب, matters pertaining to drinking. وقسم مواريث, the last one. The summary, it's a summary on the laws of inheritance. Mawarith is the laws of inheritance. Why is inheritance the last? Because it's among the last matters pertaining to one on this dunya. Even after he's buried. Because inheritance comes after one's buried. The family divides the inheritance. So it's matters that come after one is buried. As to mawarith, dividing the inheritance, some separate it and put it in a different separate book. Some combine it with fiqh. Alhamdulillah, here he put it within our book. And it's important to go over it at least briefly for a talib al-ilm. So he can encompass all the ulum pertaining to fiqh. And later on he can expand and learn more details. We do have a series on that, but it's in the old cassette tapes and were not recorded very clear. The 10 spheres of fiqh may be referred to as the major headings of this outline or even the index of the book. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, broke them down into 10 chapters here. But many other ulama in madhahib divided fiqh in various other ways. For example, the Ahnaf, the fuqaha of the Ahnaf, divided it into 3 categories. Ibn Abdin said the spheres of fiqh are ibadat, worship, mu'amalat, social dealings, and uqubat, which is legal punishments. The Malikiyya divided them into 4. Ibadat, marriage, selling and dealings and transactions, and ijara, which is contracts of hiring, and that which branches out from that. Shafi'iyya, like Al-Ramli, rahimahullah ta'ala, divided the spheres into 4 as well, but were different from the previous 4. Some of them were different than the previous 4. So he said ibadat, muamalat, social dealings, marriage, and jinayat, which is injurious crimes. The Hanabila came after them and they followed in the footsteps of Shafi'iyya and they copied exactly what Shafi'iyya did. Ibn Muflih said Ibn Qudama in his book Al-Mughni followed in the path of Shafi'iyya and divided fiqh into ibadat and muamalat and marriage and jinayat. Now what I mentioned of each of the madhahib is generally what the madhab follows. Generally. It's the trend of that madhab in their mutun and in their reference books. But there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions is the one before you. What did I just say? I said Hanabila divided fiqh into 4 categories. And here your author has 10 categories. Some even divided it into 2 categories. They just said ibadat and muamalat only. Dividing the fiqh spheres into 10 or 4 or 2 or 3, that's not a ibadah. It's from the ijtihad of the alim to categorize fiqh as best as he can in a way that he feels people will better understand his outline. Whether one chooses 10 or 4 or 2, it has no effect on the substance matter. Photograph those 10 spheres in your mind because that's the outline and index of the book that will help you organize your ideas. And from those 10 headings, there will be primary headings, secondary headings, subheadings, and so on, as with any outline, because this is a matan. And we said in the last halaqah, a matan is in reality outline. The ulama gave special attention to dividing and breaking down fiqh topics. And it's just to make it easier for you and me so we can comprehend it and understand it and learn it and teach it better. It's a method actually derived in a way from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala categorized some matters in the Quran. هو الذي خلقكم فمنكم كافر ومنكم مؤمن. هو الذي خلقكم فمنكم كافر ومنكم مؤمن. والله بما تعملون بصير. So the major heading, Allah created you. The sub or secondary heading, A, some of you are disbelievers. Sub or secondary heading, B, and some of you are believers. So there's no C, there's no in between. Crisp, clear, so everyone can get it. There are many other examples like that throughout the Quran. When knowledge is broken like that, when it's broken down like that for us, it makes it easier to comprehend and it makes the point stronger and clearer and more logical when presented. We said these 10 categories or major headings are the main index of the book. And the 10th one that we mentioned, which is the laws of inheritance. We said the last one and we mentioned why it's the last one. But if you skim through the book already, or you read it, you really don't have to. You can go along as we teach it. He mentions inheritance as chapter 7. It's not chapter 10. The book ends with chapter 7, the inheritance. There's no 8, 9, and 10. What happened to those 3 chapters? What he did is he combined between marriage and divorce. He put them under one heading, because they're related to each other. So he put them under chapter 3. He combined between jinayat and ma'asi under chapter 4, because they're related. He combined between eating and drinking under chapter 6, and that's where the 3 missing pieces of the puzzle went. The author rahimahullah ta'ala said, مدار الفقه على عشرة أشياء. Then he said, الأول في العبادات. First matter is the issue of worship. We're starting here with number 1. Number 1 of the 10 major headings. It's the longest one. Ibadat is almost half the book. The rest of the 9 are in the other half of the book. Even though ulama differ on how they outline and categorize fiqh chapters, as we stated, one of the most common things they have is that nearly all of them start with ibadat. That's one thing they almost all agree upon. Why? It's pretty obvious. Ibn Abdin al-Hanafi said they start with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us for. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Al-Ramli and Al-Dimyati, who are imams of the Shafi'i madhab, rahimahumullah, they said we start in ibadah because it pertains to the most noble of matters, meaning pertains to matters that deal and relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Dimyati said, and then we move on to social dealings among people because it's an extreme necessity. In summary, they began with ibadat because it's what we were created for. And ibadat like salah and zakah and hajj, complete ibadat that are complete. They are total, complete ibadat, which shows their importance in mentioning them first and foremost. Now, matters like social dealings, it's not an ibadah in itself, like zakat and hajj and salah. Buying and selling is a mubah dunya dealing. It may become a ibadah with a intention transforming it into a ibadah. What is a ibadah? Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, اسم لما يحب الله ويرضاه من الأقوال والأفعال والأعمال الظاهرة والباطنة. It's a collective term for everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and He's pleased with, whether it may be in sayings or actions, or whether it may be outward or inward. The author was referring specifically to the ibadat mentioned in the famous hadith on the pillars of Islam that's in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim. Islam is raised on 5 pillars. بني الإسلام على 5. شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة وحج البيت وصوم رمضان. The author said, مدار الفقه على 10 أشياء. الأول في العبادات وهي 5. الصلاة والزكاة والصوم والحج والجهاد. وهي 5. الصلاة والزكاة والصوم والحج والجهاد. The acts of worship are 5. Salah, zakah, fasting, pilgrimage, and jihad. But we have 2 problems here. He left out one of the pillars of Islam from the hadith in the outline, and he added a different one. Why did he leave out the shahadatu an la ilaha illallah? Why did he add jihad as a pillar, or with the pillars actually? Let's start with the first issue. Shahada, the word of shahada in Tawheed, is considered under the major fiqh, Al-Fiqh al-Akbar. We're studying here the minor fiqh. The word of Tawheed is studied in Tawheed and Aqidah, like Al-Usul al-Thalatha, that matan, that's where it belongs. They have independent mutun and books and fields. The term major fiqh allegedly came from Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala in describing Tawheed. They attribute that term to Abu Hanifa based on a book on Tawheed called Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, the major fiqh, and they state that he was the first to refer to Tawheed as major fiqh. The book is famous for the Hanafi and non-Hanafi madhab. In fact, it's quoted by Ibn Taymiyyah in Dar Ta'arud al-Aql wal-Naql. It's quoted by Ibn Abi al-Izz, and it's quoted by Ibn al-Qayyim, and it's quoted by Ibn Qudama. In fact, some even mentioned a chain for the book. But then some analyzed it and said this is not really the work of Abu Hanifa. It's not attributable to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. The safest route is to say Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, the book allegedly attributed to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. The Shahada, the first pillar of Islam, falls under major fiqh, Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, under the books of Tawheed and their mutun. We're studying here the minor fiqh. So that's why he omitted the Shahada from the outline. It was very rare that ulama ever put Tawheed into fiqh books. One who did that is Abu Zayd al-Qayrawani. He began his risala on fiqh with a small section on Tawheed. And that's extremely exceptional. The overwhelming vast majority of ulama began their fiqh books with ibadat, the matters of worship, and did not include tawheed as a chapter in them. The author rahimahullah ta'ala said, Al-awwalu fil ibadat. Al-awwalu fil ibadat. وهي خمسة. الصلاة والزكاة والصوم والحج والجهاد. Actually, before we go on, I forgot the second issue. Why did he add jihad to ibadat that are pillars of Islam? Why did he add jihad to ibadat that are the pillars of Islam? We all know the hadith on the pillars of Islam that I just mentioned. It's actually the first hadith that I ever memorized in my life as a child. Jihad is not in it. Abdurrahman ibn al-Qasim rahimahullah ta'ala said, he's a contemporary alim. He died nearly half a century ago, and he was the one who compiled the Fatawa of Ibn Taymiyyah and the works of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. He said, explaining this exact issue, some consider jihad the sixth pillar, and that's why it's mentioned after the five pillars. He was explaining why Hanabila included in the ibadat with the pillars of Islam. And I had a teacher who used to always attribute it to a specific Sahabi, but I was never able to find any direct statement that a Sahabi referred to as a pillar. The closest you'll possibly find is what's related in Abu Dawood al-Tayalisi in his Musnad, that Hudayfa radiallahu anh said Islam is 8 portions, and he included in those 8 portions ordaining the good and forbidding the evil and jihad, but he didn't directly say it was a pillar. Those who mention it as a 6th pillar were trying to show its high status in Islam. But when the hadith didn't specify it as a pillar, nor do I know anyone of the early Salaf who explicitly referred to it as a pillar, then I believe there's a wide variety of terms and ways to show the high status Islam gave to jihad. No one but a deluded munafiq would diminish or deny the high status Islam gave to jihad, and no one but a bigger full-blown munafiq would pervert its real, true meanings that the Prophet ﷺ gave it. In some of the narrations about that hadith on the pillars of Islam, Hajj is mentioned as a 4th pillar. In some, it's changed around with Siyam and mentioned as a 5th pillar. And in another hadith, the Messenger gave jihad precedence over Hajj. So do we then say Hajj is a 5th pillar rather than say it's a 6th? Or we say sometimes it's a 5th and a 6th? The Messenger ﷺ specified certain matters under certain terminologies. And we should stick to them, especially since the Salaf didn't use them from what I believe. The Messenger, the hadith that I was referring to, the Messenger ﷺ was asked, سُئِلَ أَيُّ الْعَمَلِ أَفْضَلِ, what's the best of deeds? He said, إِيمَانٌ بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, to believe in Allah and His Apostle. They said, what else after that? He said, الْجِهَادُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. They said, what else after that? He said, حَجٌّ مَبْرُورٌ, to perform Hajj. We can't make jihad a 5th pillar based on that, or a 6th one, but that shows us the importance of this mighty, noble obligation. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala pertaining to this hadith said, he commented on this hadith, said, jihad was given precedence in that jihad is a matter that benefits everyone, while Hajj benefits only the individual. Or he said it may be in reference to when jihad is a fard ayn. Ulama of Haqq have spoken so highly of jihad in various ways that shows its importance without needing to refer to it as the 6th pillar specifically. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said, I don't know anything after the obligations more essential than jihad. لا أعلم شيئا بعد الفرائض أفضل من الجهاد. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala had very similar statements. And more important than all those quotes is the ayat of the Quran. يا أيها الذين آمنوا هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم تؤمنون بالله ورسوله وتجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون وتجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. Some referred to ordaining the good and forbidding the evil as the sixth pillar. And the same explanation applies to that. Why did the author mention jihad under matters of ibadah and worship? Why did the author mention jihad under the matters of ibadah or worship? The earliest one to mention jihad under ibadat in fiqh outline was Mahfuz Abu al-Khattab in his book Al-Hidayah ala Madhab al-Imam Ahmad, and he died 510 years after the Hijrah. Generally, and there's exceptions from this research, is that Hanafiya and the latter more recent fuqaha of the Hanabila, they mention jihad under the chapter of ibadah after the pillars of Islam. In the author's biography, we said in the last halaqah, he's more of a contemporary Hanbali alim. He only died 500 years ago. She's not from the early generations. So he falls under the more recent Hanabila, and he followed in their trend. He followed in the more recent Hanabila's trend of including it under ibadah. Shafi'iyya, Malikiyya, and the earlier Hanabila generally mention jihad in mu'amalat, social dealings, which is the next main chapter after ibadah. Or there's other various chapters it's included in. It's mentioned in mu'amalat, social relationship, because jihad is a type of a relationship with people. It deals with other people. Abu al-Qasim al-Khiraqi mentioned it and thought it was best placed under the judicial section. And he put it there instead of ibadat. But overall, it falls under what I told you of the breakdown among the madhahib. Those who mentioned it under ibadat, like our author, why? Because jihad overall is ibadah. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, the ulama and what I know all agree that there's nothing among the voluntary ibadat more virtuous than jihad. When it's ibadah, it must be sincere and it must be in accordance. And in accordance means we need to learn its proper rules and regulations. So number one is ibadah. That's why they included it under ibadah, because it is a ibadah. Number two, the ulama were ulama back then. Not like what you see today of those so-called ulama who've reclined to this dunya and sold their deen and detached themselves from the worries of the ummah. Ulama were moved by the causes of this ummah. In fact, Ibn Qudama, who I mentioned last halaqah, one of the biggest ulama of the Hanbali madhab of all time, who served the Hanbali fiqh, as I told you, with his writings for different various levels on the Hanbali madhab. You get an image from what he wrote and what he did of work, that all he did was sit with his feather and his ink pot, writing day and night. He did do that, but he had another side of him that many don't know. He was in the forefront with the soldiers under the leadership of Salah ad-Din's army, and he fought in the front lines, and he helped liberate and conquer Akka, and Tabariya, and Hittin, and Tibnin, and Sayda, and Beirut, and Asqalan, all the way until they liberated Quds. That's what the Crusaders occupied it. They say he spent his time between teaching and jihad. The point of all this is that it's possible that some ulama who chose to put jihad under ibadat, which is the most important chapter, they did so in the purpose of showing the high status of jihad. So they put it in the most important chapter of fiqh. There are many other chapters, as we said, that jihad broadly falls under, which other ulama did. But putting it here by some ulama may be to highlight its importance and status. Yes, this is a fiqh book, not an inspirational book. But when you're moved by something and it's part of you, and it's something you deeply love, hence of your love for something slips out and becomes apparent no matter what topic you write or speak about, even if it's grammar. And if it doesn't come out unintentionally due to your deep love for it, you yourself try to slip it in one way or another because you're moved by it. Placing jihad in this category of fiqh lets people understand the one who obligated salah, siyam, zakah, hajj is the one who obligated jihad. The one who said كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامِ is the one who said كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالِ. The third reason why jihad was under ibadat, and it's a unique wisdom in placing jihad in this order, at the end of the chapter on ibadat, right before the chapter of muamalat, which is social dealings. And that's because ibadat is dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's your relationship with Allah. And overall, the proofs are mostly centered around the Quran and the Sunnah with some ijtihad in them. The next chapter is muamalat, social relationships and dealings between people. There's a lot of ijtihad in them. One is pertaining to your dealing with Allah and one is pertaining to people. One has a lot of nusus in it, one has a lot of ijtihad in it. So they included jihad at the end of ibadat to smooth the way into the new chapter of muamalat, the social relationship. Because jihad has an aspect of ibadah in it. And jihad has an aspect of dealings with people in it. So it's the best topic to blend the ibadah chapter into the muamalat chapter, because the jihad involves both. So now let's start on salah. الأول منها الصلاة وتشتمل على 7 أشياء: شرط ركن وواجب وسنة ومباح ومكروه ومحرم. The first of it is salah. The first of the matters of the ibadat is salah. And it's clear why he chose salah as the first ibadah. The audience I'm speaking to, of course, clearly know that. Actually, I think it's better to end it here instead of ending it halfway through. Let's stop at this point right here, and inshallah we'll continue next week with salah and what's after that. Jazakumullahu khair wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.